there's so much for us to learn from people who, through different paths, have found their own flow. There's so many roads to arrive to that place. And I think that brings a lot of humility as well, to understand that our path is not the only path, and that there may be paths that have teachings that are more integral, like, all right, that encapsulate more of life.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I would like to introduce Nicolas Canon to Project Vitality. And Nicolas is a best-selling author. He's an educator. He's a coach. He helps people that are spirit-led. And that's what I wanted to have him on the show for, because there's a lot of us that are in the business world that are spirit-led. What does that even mean? Well, we're going to talk about that. But a lot of us do struggle with money and power and really working in kind of that mainstream world. And Nicolas really helps people to follow their truth and lead from the heart and listen to the downloads and be with spirit, but also be practical and create solutions for themselves in their own life, but all the people that they want to serve. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we started off with talking about spirit-led. Now, can you give me an explanation of what spirit is? Because a lot of people can look at the spirituality world and think it's a little bit woo-woo. It's a little bit, you've got to wear purple, you've got to hold all your crystals. There's a very specific kind of dogmatic, almost, approach of what spirituality is. And what I really love about you and what you teach and what you not just teach but embody is almost that individuality of being spirit-led. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So unfortunately, the word spirituality has gotten a very bad rep, all the way from how it was abused by churches and religions. Being a spiritual person was a synonym of being judgmental, being righteous, being divisive, being very in your head and full of shame, and kind of casting out so much judgment on the world. No matter what the religion is, most religions have a flavor of this, where, I'm a spiritual person, therefore the world life is dirty, or I don't want to hang out with people of the world. There is a lot of that, right? And then on the other hand, we have let's say the hippies, or the people that are just grabbing their crystals and taking a bunch of psychedelics, drinking too much ayahuasca, a little too many mushrooms, LSD, acid, and from festival to festival, preaching peace and love and going with the flow, and not amounting to much, and often struggling a lot with being consistent, with being grounded, with keeping their word, with being reliable, right? So we have spirituality as either this righteousness that makes some people think they're above everybody else, or we have it as this experience that seems to be all about freedom and avoiding responsibility, all about trying to leave this world in exchange for the psychedelic world or something else, or rebelling against all that we consider society and quote-unquote normal life. So when I say spirit-led, part of my work is trying to redefine what being spiritual means to the people, to the world. And I say that because my understanding of someone that is spirit-led or led by their spirit is, what's our spirit? Is there's something beyond our mind and our body. There's something like, we have a mind, we have a body, but there's something that is running this. There's so much intelligence within us that we cannot comprehend. Just the thousands, if not millions, of unicellular and multicellular organisms that are cooperating within our flesh just to keep us alive, just to make so many microtransactions of energy, of nutrients, of all kinds of things for us to breathe, for us to have an experience of being an individual. Even though there's no individual, we're plural, there's so many little things happening, all in a certain order that we're not controlling. Like, I'm not doing it through my mind. I'm not in charge of that. I'm not directing the orchestra. So our spirit is a part beyond our mind. beyond our body. It is the source of that. It is the life that we are. And the life that is throbbing in a tree, in a plant, even in a stone, that from where everything is made. So what does it mean to be led by that? To me, it means to live life in a way that honors the greatest part of us, the part that is the most inclusive, but also the part that is most connected and fearless. Because fear is just from the mind. Oh, I'm afraid people are going to judge me. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. People that want to launch their businesses and they consider themselves spiritual often struggle with imposter syndrome, with what are people going to think about me? And that's just their head, their mind. What if? Or very often, their bodies, their emotions feel anxious. So their work can take a toll. Most people, whether they work in, let's say, in a spiritual or wellness industry or corporate, for most people, their days fluctuate, their work fluctuates, their life fluctuates based on the thoughts they're having and how they're feeling. It can be a beautiful day outside, but if they're miserable inside of them, it's a miserable day. So being spirit-led means that we acknowledge what is here, we don't bypass it, but we enter into contact with something greater. We serve something that goes way beyond what we're thinking, what we're feeling, way beyond our compulsions, our tendencies, our patterns, our history. Because only from that place we can be creative in a way that is clean, that is new. Only in that way we can also be fearless, because if I'm not really involved or entangled with what's going on through my mind, then whenever an idea comes, I can execute on it, and I'm not second guessing it. I'm not worried about what are people going to think about me. It's also being deeply involved with life, because the moment that I recognize that there's something in me that is much greater, I understand that lies in you as well, and in everybody that I come in contact with. Suddenly everybody becomes family. Everybody's an extension of myself. So the matter of trying to trick someone or not being of service to somebody else, or the divisiveness that can be common in the business world or the world in general, most of that is gone if you're serving something greater, because that greater thing, you see it in the person that you're in contact with. You see their divinity, you see the part of them that is one with that same part of you. And from that place, every action that you take, at least you intend for every action that you take to be in service to life itself. So that's very different from someone whose spirituality or spiritual practices are just for them to get a little high, for them to see some colors, to talk about fancy things, but dissociate and disconnect from this earth. That's also a trip of individuality, no different than the businessman that is drowning in his greed and just working, the workaholic, and abandoning his family and everything just because he's so centered into what he wants, what he needs, and what his mind and compulsions are driving him towards. Same, it's a different expression. The person that just wants to smoke more weed, take more psychedelics, disconnect more from the earth. They're just thinking about pleasure, just different kinds of pleasure.
Yeah, we call them bliss bunnies.
What is it?
Bliss bunnies.
Blitz bunnies. The thing is, if it was like that, great. If their life was one of total bliss, amazing. That is small moments of bliss followed by this constant anxiety, these withdrawals, these states of judgment, this tension around a life that is disorganized, that has so much chaos. So I've met many people that kind of operate in this kind of space.
I've also come across a lot of what I call bliss bunnies, and it's that brief moments of bliss, and then they have to get their next bliss, and they're always chasing that bliss because they can't just be in bliss. It's always chasing the next festival, the next doof, as you said, the next psychedelic, smoking weed, whatever it is. It's always chasing it like it's an external thing that they can never just have and be.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that I notice is they're not grounded. You're not connected with your body. It's one of those things. It's kind of like the alcoholic at the pub where all his friends are alcoholic, but all their friends are all the bliss buddies all doing the same thing. And so there's not, it's difficult to walk away from that. Like my experience is working and drinking in nightclubs. It is difficult to walk away from that because everybody you know is in that space. So then you become a little bit boring, or, you know, from their perspective, like, oh my God, he's so boring. He's just sitting at home doing nothing or reading a book. But you're in this place of, even though you're not chasing that high, you're still at that high level. You know, you've found that in all walks of life, whether that be going to the farmer's market for me, or reading a book, or sitting just looking at the birds. Like it's more of a constant state of bliss rather than a one-off big dose of it where you feel like so connected and then there's this massive withdrawal from it.
Yeah. If spirituality or a spiritual path doesn't become something that is at the forefront of the way we live, then it's just entertainment. As you said, person who has embodied or who has actually embraced the path fully realizes that from the moment they wake up until they go to sleep, there is nothing that they do that is outside of their journey of growth. You know, washing the dishes, the way we shower, the love with which we speak to someone that maybe we don't like that much. Our mind will come with our likes and dislikes, the things, oh, I want to do this, I don't want to do that. I like this person, not that one. And then just getting past that and being in a deep relationship with life and being present, that's all we really need. If we want to be in constant bliss, of course. And it takes maturity to realize that a spiritual journey is not just a few nights in ceremony or just an experience I have isolated from the rest of my life. To understand that it's also not Sundays at church. Sure, those things can fuel you, they can motivate you, they can bring you in contact with community, but ultimately it's the way that we live. And then once we touch that, we realize that I don't need mediators, I don't need substances. There are medicines that can give us a push, that can get us out of some dark holes or disentangle certain parts of our journey, and they're very sacred and powerful of that. But every master, every great teacher has as their greatest intention not to create more students, but to create more teachers, to create more masters, right? So every spiritual journey, every guru, every messiah, or every wise man and woman that has lived in this world, they were trying to pass on who they were, not what they knew, and trying to create more people that were in direct connection to something greater, to their spirit, not just more people that wanted to follow a set of tools and actions and beliefs. So yeah, and I believe that, you know, I think it's our job to, this is how I see it. If I consider myself a spiritual person, if that is my lived experience, I think it is my duty to walk through life with so much integrity and groundedness and compassion and presence that when people in the future think about spirituality, they don't think of some life avoidant, psychedelic addicted hippie or woo-woo crystal and manifestation person that is struggling to make money or keep a job, but that they think, wow, like a spiritual person is someone who is a big yes to life, not avoiding any part of it. You know, someone who wakes up early, goes to sleep late because they have so much energy, so much fire, so much life. Someone who you can rely on, whose word is impeccable. You can trust this person. Like, they're creators of their reality, and they move with dignity, with honor, with responsibility, like in an effective way, not dismissing, not avoiding any part of life. I think we owe it to ourselves and to the world to start moving in that way, to show the world also that, like, I don't get these people who are self-proclaimed spiritual people and they're struggling with money, For most, it's not a conscious choice. It's a conscious choice for some devotees in India that take a vow of certain sadhana, certain spiritual practice where they cannot buy anything and they just beg for food and do their practice. And that is a conscious choice. For most people, there's financial struggle is not a conscious choice. If I say that I'm so close to God, the creator, source, whatever you want to call it, why would that, if that was able to create life, the miracle of life itself, why is it hard for that to guide me or show me or bring some financial stability into my life? I think it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense because at the end of the day, the spiritual practice of that person tends to be one that is really in their head and dissociated from life. It's a spirituality that is kind of a self-referential loop. It becomes this mental masturbation around ideas that feel good, that sound nice, but that don't have any actual expression or experience that is reflected in the world.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. So first of all, have you always been this way, connected with spirit? Have you always kind of walked through life and been so much aware of it? And the reason I ask this is I kind of look at my old life where I was the party boy and had a lot of freedom and really could kind of do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And from the outside perspective, I looked really free. I looked like I was having a great time, but deep inside, and it took a while. Of course, in my younger 20s, like I was actually having the time of my life. It was great. But as I grew older, or I don't know, maybe matured more, there was something inside of me that was missing. And I was being a bliss buddy. It was all about me. Everything was about just having fun and having a good time and not really being of service to anyone or humanity. And so have you always been of service to humanity, or let me know a little bit, let the viewers know a little bit about your background?
No, I think we have a similar story, because in my 20s, for me, it was all about partying, women, drinking, traveling. I was spent part of my 20s working as a dating coach for a company that did dating and relationship coaching for men. So that involved a decent bit of traveling, and I'd be the guy that, like, I was the youngest one in the team. So every time we held a retreat or a workshop, it's like, okay, Nico, take all these guys out, or go show them how to party, or help them out in talking to women at night. And yeah, the life that I used to live was very, 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 very different. It was fueled by lust, predominantly by the desire to be approved of, respected, socially validated. I tried to prove myself so much through women, through sex, later on through making money. And there was a hint of personal development, which is not spirituality. Personal development tends to be about becoming better people. I have more skills. I am better in some way. My understanding, my experience of spirituality is about becoming less of myself. It's a process of self-annihilation, self-destruction. Who I think I am, I grind that so that I don't have to wait for life to grind me and to knead me and to kind of smooth my edges. So I do it myself through my practice so that I can be empty and just in connection to life. To me, that's spirituality. Self-development is, become a better speaker, become more charming, become all these things. So I had glimpses of that. I had some experiences with that. But most of my life I was just chasing women and drugs and parties and drinking. I was the person, if I had met myself today, back then, I would have had severe judgments. So I would have thought, what is this guy talking about? What do you mean there's more to life than the women and parties and just having fun?
Yeah. So we've lived a very similar past life in this life. So I wanted to talk about one of the other things I see you talk about is your relationship with your wife.
Mm-hmm.
And how, and one thing I see with spiritual people, and I always put in air quotes, is they're generally very loose. There's polyamorous, there's all these different relationship types, and each to their own. But I do see a lot of it as escapism from that growth and that connection and that vulnerability. It's almost like they're just chasing that next little bit of bliss where they can feel connection, but not actually have that responsibility. So someone who is spirit-led like yourself, but also is noticeably devoted to your life and very loving and talks about how much growth you've had in that experience. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
My experience was in my 20s, exploring a lot with open relationships, not really polyamory, but kind of a flavor of that. Agreements that were very loose, very vague. There was a lot of sexual exploration, and under the thought of, we're free, marriage is an institution, and so many other ideas around that. And I tried it, and I was convinced. In fact, I spent big time when the company that I worked for. I was the guy that was teaching guys how to have open relationships. I was talking about sexual exploration. I was giving conferences around the world on that. So I was a big proponent of that back in the day, and I thought, this is the way it is, and this is the way it works. Until life always catches up with you, and eventually it caught up with me, and I realized that I lost the relationship that I was in. It got not destroyed. We destroyed it together with the woman that I was dating, and it had such an ugly death. It was so painful, and it got so toxic towards the end that I realized, what am I doing? If I don't get it, if my own relationship ends up like this, which was so painful and so much drama and toxicity, I don't have any business teaching men what to do. And I also realized that a lot of how that relationship had ended, it was the bitter fruits that I had planted through the seeds of being promiscuous, through the seeds of being casual, through the seeds of just not really honoring the life of another person. So in spiritual groups, there's a lot of, again, there's a lack of structure usually. It's the lack of structure around their business, lack of structure around their daily routine, a lot of going with the flow, not really understanding really what the flow means or what they're going with. And this translates into the real. Well. Yeah, exactly.
It's like you can do whatever you want. Just, there's no consequences. You'll be right.
Whatever you do, it's like you can get away with whatever you do as long as you tell everyone who was impacted, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, but those are your emotions and you have to deal with them. It's like no accountability. There's so many ways in which people misuse and abuse spiritual teachings. They make them fit and support their nonsense and their immaturity. And I've been there, so I know, I've been that person without boundaries, without healthy relationships. And now I realize when I decided to marry my wife, it was a process of growth. It was difficult. Our relationship did not start in sunshine and rainbows. We loved each other, we met each other, but we both had a lot of nonsense going into it. A lot of trauma, a lot of baggage, a lot of ugly patterns. And eventually I understood that we always date the same person, just in a different body. And usually when we wrap up with this person, if we haven't grown, we haven't learned, we come back, we meet a different man or woman. That is just the continuation of the last story. We take a break, but we come back to that. Why? Because we're carrying ourselves with us. Marriage is a big commitment that in a way forces us to not hide anymore. It's like if I'm committed to working with this woman, the problem is it's not her. The problem is the parts of me that want to run away, the parts of me that I don't want to look at, the parts of me that will be easier to ignore if I was single or if I was with someone that I'm not living with, that I'm not sharing finances with, that we're not considering having a family with. And I've seen that the only way marriage can work is if you're devoted to one another. Only if you put your partner above yourself, only if you can throw yourself fully into that relationship and like raise them and see them and their well-being as number one above yours, only like that it can work. And both people do it, but people need to do it. If I treat my wife like her needs are more important than mine, the beautiful thing is that very often she does the same. She treats me like my needs are more important than hers. That is the only way it can work. Now, for most couples, and I've been there as well, it's like we get into a relationship and we want to get our needs met. So I'm trying to force her to meet my needs, and she's doing the same. And I'm trying to take something from her, and she's trying to take something from me. And that makes things very, 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 very difficult. For me, marriage has been, next to ayahuasca, has been probably side by side, maybe even more marriage, a spiritual path, a potent medicine. Because there's no way you can handle it if you're still, in my case, being a little boy, if you're still like selfish, self-gratifying. There's no way you can handle it if you are unwilling to open yourself up, to be vulnerable, to be honest. No way it can work if you are unwilling to trust and to have faith that maybe if you throw yourself fully into it, it may inspire something in the other person. From that place, I found that even though it was so hard, because I had the tendency of short-lived relationships and very casual encounters, so committing to one woman, it was a tall order. Even though it was like that, there's just so much order and harmony and beauty that has brought into my life that has found expression in every other area. I saw once I got my energies kind of organized around my relationship, same thing started to happen with my business, with my projects, with my creative endeavors, with my family. Like kind of everything started falling into place. And the chaos that I was living in of, this kind of free-flowing lifestyle and somewhat careless and just focused on my own pleasure, that started taking a different kind of shape that I'm very happy with. That is much more mature than what it was.
Yeah, I noticed within myself and a lot of people, I guess, in that entrepreneurial type world, is they do struggle with relationships because they want that growth and they want that personal development and they need the followers and the business success, and everything it's pretty much me. And what I've noticed in myself is every time I reach a certain level where I'm not listening to spirit, boom, you get taken down, like, because you're not being mature enough to do the grinding yourself and the molding yourself. Spirit will come in and knock you down. And I guess when you first start on that entrepreneurial experience, nobody kind of really tells you, hey, you're going to get knocked down over and over and over again. And it's going to, in that moment, be the worst thing possible, but it's going to be the greatest part. It's going to make you who you are, and you're going to appreciate all that happens to you in the future. Right now, it's going to be horrible and disgusting and painful and all those things. And I see a lot of people give up in these scenarios, and they give up on their business. They give up on what they do, and then they go to that next thing that's slightly easier, or it's got a bit more excitement and the carrot's dangling and it's shiny. And so you see people going from one thing to another. And I have this tendency in myself. I'm multi-passionate. I have lots of ideas and lots of things I want to do. And I have in life found trouble grounding one thing and being mature and then moving on and expanding into the next. And when you talk about relationship with your wife, the reality is everything is a relationship, and our growth is through relationship. The beauty of having someone devoted and you devoted to them is that there is this kind of responsibility and accountability that you can't run away from. Whereas if you're, self-employed, no one's going to know if you don't do any work that day. There's no accountability. You can say, oh yeah, I've been working really hard on my business, but you've just been on YouTube wasting time, or you've slept in, or, you've done whatever, been at the beach all day. You might put a story up of, look at me on my computer working hard, but the reality is, you're bullshitting yourself. And I guess I wanted to have your experience on, we live in this world where It's almost about glam and success, your followers, your status. It's all about that, and showing how good we are. It's almost like we've reached a level in society where everything's about, as long as I can get approval by people that I've never met or never will meet, then I'm happy. It's no secret that doTERRA has had a huge positive impact on my life, specifically around my mental health and my immune system. I've been doing this business now for 10 years, and I can ship these products to anyone, anywhere in the world within 7 days. So if you're needing a good night's sleep, reducing your stress, if you're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, need some immune support, digestive support, metabolic health support, pretty much anything I can think of, these oils and doTERRA product range can support you. Now, I've created a landing page. It's thathealthdude.com/doTERRA, or you can also reach out to me in their DMs and I can make a custom package specifically for your needs. There's two ways. Either become a customer, that's 90% of my business, or if you've got a wellness brand and a business, you can use doTERRA and me, the perks are you get me, as a fulfillment partner to really support and enhance the vitality of your customer base. Just go to thathealthdude.com/doTERRA or send me a message in any of my social platforms in a DM. But then I notice a lot of people don't really have those close relationships. And if they do have those close relationships, a lot of their time, they're not people that will challenge them in their growth. Like, for example, with you and your wife, where, okay, we're devoted. Now, let's be accountable and let's work through things. A lot of people will, either push friends aside, or they're not spiritual enough, they're not entrepreneurial enough. I'm the only one that knows. I wanted to get your opinion on that.
In essence, as long as the source of our fulfillment lies behind the choice of somebody else, it's going to be a painful life. It's going to be hell. As long as my happiness depends on you liking me or somebody I don't know liking me, or on a vanity metric on some social media application, even the numbers I see on my bank account when I wake up, as long as my inner experience is dictated by an outer circumstance, I'm heading straight towards misery. Because I will never be able to control for everyone to like me. Most people can't even get their own dog to do what they want, let alone their partner, their followers, whatever. It's a lost cause. Many entrepreneurs get caught up in that. They miss, or they forget the reason they started. And entrepreneurship at its source is just the organized attempt to solve a problem, whatever it is. Whatever you're selling, people are just trying to solve a problem. Like, somebody here is thirsty, I want to sell them water. This person wants to dance and party, I want to sell them a nightclub ticket, whatever. If we disconnect from that, then it makes things very, 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 very hard. If I forget why I started the whole thing, and I start thinking about me instead of thinking about the people that I want to serve, then I think it's very hard to keep it going. Very, 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 very hard. Like, for example, my wife, she's a breathwork teacher. She's incredible at what she does. And every time she leads breathwork for people, they tell her, wow, it was like, she has so many testimonials. She's changed the life of so many women in so many countries. She's got a lot of evidence. And yet sometimes there are moments when I ask her to lead breath work online for some of my groups, and she shows up and her voice is shaky, and she feels afraid and insecure, and you can tell. And when I ask her afterwards how she felt leading that, she said, oh, I felt so afraid, I felt insecure, and ask her how come. And she's Russian, like English is her second language. She's like, oh, I was worried that people would judge my English. I was worried that maybe I wasn't looking very good. I was worried that maybe, I don't know, like, long story short, I was worried about me. This self-referential loop, this self-referential thought process is what has somebody lose their power. Now, the best sessions that she has had is when there's no thought of myself, what I like, what I dislike, who I am, who I'm not, but all of her focus, all of her presence is in the person in front of her or in the group in front of her. Suddenly she's just presence itself. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, we're always oscillating between these two. It's like, am I thinking about how people are going to see me, what my family is going to say? Am I thinking about me, how I look, how I'm perceived? Or am I actually concerned with being of value to somebody else? The more that, and I notice this, the more that my attention is on how can I be of service, the more that my business flows effortlessly. But it's the moment when I start comparing myself, when I start thinking too much about myself, either in a self-aggrandized way or in a like self-judgmental kind of way, it always leads to pain, to burnout, to emotions that create too much friction. So running a business is hard enough on its own. Whatever type of business, being an entrepreneur is hard. You're dancing with uncertainty. That's what you're doing. You're dancing with the mystery. You live 90% of your time thinking, is this going to work? I hope it does. And sometimes it does. And very often it doesn't. And you take a deep breath and you continue, even though you failed, even though you might fail again. And even though every step of the way, there's something new and you realize how little you know. No matter how big your business, you realize, oh, I don't know how to grow past this point. It's like you're flying an airplane, then it's a lot of fixing. And then you are both flying the airplane and being the mechanic. You are running back and forth between being the pilot and being in the engine room trying to keep the thing going. So that's a lot of work. To add to that, anxiety, fear, insecurity, that's impossible. Like everybody I've met that cannot get out of their own way, they never get past a basic way of like a basic income, because they're adding too much friction to a process that is already challenging to begin with. It's like you're gonna burn out, you're gonna resent this process. Your body is not gonna be able to handle the amount of tension and stress that you're putting it through unnecessarily, because if you just focus on being of service, then that's it. Your attention is on being of service and flying the plane and fixing whatever needs to be fixed, and that's it. No emotions around it. No pats on the back, but also no judgments.
Yeah. One of the things that really grounded me is my doTERRA business, and that's one of the interesting parts was I was always very much rebellious against corporate and structure. And what I noticed is when I came into my business, I was like that. I was like, oh, this structure and this corporate, they're a big monster and blah, blah, blah. But what I started to realize is, wow, when you have structure, when you have accountability, your mission and your vision actually expands far greater than ever possible if you're just going with the flow. And it was really interesting because before that, I'd never really heard of the word service. I didn't really know what it meant. It's like you make money and you do whatever you want with your money and it's fun. As long as you're not really harming anyone, you're a decent person. And that's kind of how I lived. And I wasn't really harming anyone. Like people were having fun. That was great. And I didn't know that what I was missing was being of service. And so when I came into this and I heard all these people, and it was really interesting as well, because I was spiritual and a lot of these people were Mormons or religious or very grounded, had like 7, 8 kids in their family. And I'm like, they're wearing suits that pretty much look like they're from the op shop because they're not really worried about all the fancy stuff. Even though a lot of them have a lot of wealth, they don't really show it off or anything like that. And I remember just being like, what is this? And there was this kind of internal struggle of what being of service was. And every time I would bring customer service, they were super friendly and helpful. I'm like, what drugs are these people on? Like, why are they so excited to just help in every single aspect? And here's me complaining and angry and frustrated. And they're like, no worries, we'll help you out. And what I started to notice was, wow, these people are deeply grounded in spirituality. Like they're deeply grounded in being of service. And yeah, they don't go to the spiritual festivals and all that type of stuff. They're devoted to their family, they're devoted to their community, they're devoted to helping others. And it really kind of shifted me into realizing a lot of areas where I was irresponsible. And it's also been interesting because anytime I would drift away, it's like with all business. This is too hard, it doesn't work. And you've got to go through all these belief systems and stories. And every time it was coming back to, you're just running away from being of service. You're playing it down because, like, when you are that entrepreneur, no one is going to come knocking on your door and like, why aren't you being of service today? But deep internally, you know, hey, I am not letting people down, but I have gifts to share, and this structure and this accountability and these people that you surround yourself with actually is great for you. And so I guess I wanted to ask you with that little bit of a rant is, when you start going on this journey, for no better word, of entrepreneurship, and you start being surrounded by people that are successful, being of service, it can be quite confronting. It can be quite, well, for example, Nicholas, he's being of service. Great name, by the way. He's being of service, but, he's spiritual. And so someone that's maybe religious might look at you and go, it's almost like this grinding happens because we are all interconnected and we can work as a team. And you see, the world right now, it's all friction everywhere, but we can actually grind and we can work together. And although you might dress different, look different, have 8 kids, and here's me as a single man building an essential oil business, for example, we can mold and we can work together and we can get the greatest aspects of each other and we can actually help each other. So I wanted to know your experience of when you come into this entrepreneurial world where you've seen other people, how have they challenged you in a way and continue to challenge you?
So for me, one of the most obvious or clear references for this were my father and my mother. Like, my mom was a religious woman, like Christian, Catholic. Later, she joined a Christian cult, and she was like the typical religious, go to church on Sundays, judgmental, righteous, everything is shameful and whatnot. And she's not that way today. Like, today, she's a very different woman. But growing up, she was like that. My dad, on the other hand, was an entrepreneur. He is an entrepreneur, and he's one of those rags to riches. He was a farm boy displaced by civil war in Colombia, and just kind of bootstrapped his way into the work that he does today. So on one hand, I had a reference of spirituality that was a religious person, and on the other hand, I had someone that was a very practical man. And the interesting thing that I noticed was that there was always more pain, more chaos around the relationship with my mother, and always more like of a heavy space, difficult emotions and chaos. And with my father, things were super smooth, super smooth. As I grew older, I realized that spirituality has nothing to do with whether we say we're spiritual or whether we are religious or what religion we follow. Ultimately, it's how inclusive we are. Because if every spiritual journey has at the end of every spiritual path is coming back to God, where it is the idea of heaven, the idea of samadhi, of enlightenment, of whatever you name it, is you become one with God. You return to the essence of creation, right? You merge into the oneness. So that's at the end of every single religion, every single spiritual path. That's kind of the end goal. You become one. You come back from being having been separated from the divine father and whatnot. I believe every single religion or spiritual path describes God as is just everything. The source of everything is just God is everywhere, is everything, all of life, all of the universe, everything. So then the journey is really about coming back to that which is one with everything. So meaning the journey is just one of arriving to a point where we have an experiential sense of inclusion. whether it's another person in front of me, a stone, a distant galaxy, where I feel I am the moment that I am one with everything, then that's by definition I am one with God, right? So that journey is just learning to include more and more and more and more, be more and more inclusive, where there's not me and you, but there's more inclusion. So for me, that's really spirituality, just a journey of being inclusive, whatever the person is preaching. And I realized very quickly that some of the most divisive people are the most spiritual or the most religious. And I saw that my mom and her church girlfriends, that were really these judgmental, bitter old ladies. Whereas my dad was simple man, extremely generous, extremely kind with his attention. He lives life, and to this day, he lives with a lot of ease. He doesn't take things personal. He looks at everything as an opportunity for growth, and he tries to be of service to be inclusive with everybody. So, in your example, you were sharing that you got to work with some people that had very different ways of seeing life, but were, devoted to their families and whatnot. I think these are great reference points to see, wow, people here are happy. People here happy, and they're living in harmony with the world, and they believe something very different from what I do. And it doesn't matter. They can believe in the flying spaghetti monster. They can believe in some spirit in the jungle. They can believe in Jesus and God. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. It does not make a difference. If that doesn't show up as a tangible expression, as an evident change in how we move through the world, then all of that is just delusion. If my spiritual journey doesn't impact everything that I do during my day to day, then it's just a fantasy in my mind. On the other hand, there's so much for us to learn from people who, through different paths, have found their own flow. Or like, this person is a Mormon, they have money, they're very simple, they're very humble. I'm very happy, like, what's going on? Then we understand, is not. There's so many roads to arrive to that place, and I think that brings a lot of humility as well, to understand that our path is not the only path, and that there may be paths that have teachings that are more integral, like, all right, that encapsulate more of life. It's not just either or. It's like, sure, it's our life is for indigenous cultures in South American shamanism, the sun is the father. And the mother it's Mother Earth, right? So the Father Sun and Mother Earth, and it is the sun that penetrates with its light the earth and creates life. Thanks to the light and to the waters of the earth, then we have life as we know it. For them, the relationship is, one of reverence to everything, reverence to the sun, reverence to the earth, and it may look very different from what we see, what somebody preaches to us in a religion, in a spiritual practice. And you go to, you spend time with indigenous cultures, you go and you see the way they live, and there's so much harmony, so much love, and they're grounded. They also understand that life is not either or. It's not just God or what is physical. It's not just the being of light, of pure light, and it's also not just the field. Is really being in relationship with life means that we honor that both need to coexist, and this life is a result of that dance, of that relationship. This life is a result of something very spiritual and very essential and divine, and something very physical and very solid, tangible. And I mean, the word mundane is kind of derogatory, but it's not really mundane. It's just physical, and it's dense, but not in a bad way. And the life that we live is, we are at the intersection of that. We are souls with walking bodies. We are moving pieces of the earth made out of flesh, of the same minerals and carbon and all the stuff that we can find on the soil. We're a bit more mobile than a tree. And what's animating us is something else, something intangible. So ultimately, I feel that the more a person embraces their spiritual journey in relation to both the physical world and whatever they consider God or the spiritual, the more harmony you will live with. Because if you only live a physical life, you have a full belly, sexual partners, safety, but there's going to be something that is missing. No matter how much you create in this life, it's going to feel incomplete. Like there's something, there must be something more than just survival. If you live just purely a life dedicated to transcending, all right, maybe you're going to close your eyes and go into deep states of bliss. It's going to be very hard for you to sustain that if your body is screaming for you to feed it. In most spiritual traditions, any serious tradition, the first part of the work is with the body, to stabilize the body. They don't try to shoot you up the stars like people do with psychedelics. No, like first several years of really grounding yourself. Like balance before intensity. First you ground the appliance, then you amp up the voltage. Otherwise, you're going to fry it. So my experience is the same. If we live a life where we're avoiding any part, connection with something greater, we're not getting into depression, anxiety, and meaninglessness. But if we avoid the connection with the physical, it's a different kind of anxiety. Anxiety around survival. That is not going to let us focus into the deep work. Now, if we honor both, it's like honoring the father and the mother, the divine, the physical, Shiva, Shakti in the yogic traditions. And from that place, we can actually play the game properly, enjoy the game that we came here to play. Whatever that looks like for some people, the game they want to play is around relationships and creating that and a family. For many people, it's around entrepreneurship. Like, all right, I understand how life works in some ways. I want to build something that stays after I go. I want to be of service. I want to share how joyful I am and be able to pass it on to others or share some of what I've learned. So, but it cannot happen if we dismiss either part.
My favorite quote is, chop wood, become enlightened, chop wood. And it's, it really emphasizes that, like what you said, you've got to work on the physical body first. You got to get out there, you got to do the labor, you got to do the growth. Yeah, the tree's not going to chop itself. Mm-hmm. You become enlightened, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Connected to spirit. But then you come back and you still are in the physical. And what I do notice is there's a lot of people that try to shoot off into the stars. And you see a lot of people at, for example, spiritual events and things like that. And a lot of them are quite unhealthy. They're quite overweight. And it's almost like they have, they've had this moment where they've escaped into the cosmos and they've felt how expansive it is. But they forgot that they're having a human experience. And so they kind of live in the air and not in their body. And then you have the other side, which is they just don't ever expand out of the body. There's until something shocks them. Like from my own example, when I got sick, it's like either an illness, a death of somebody they love, some type of financial crisis, a relationship breakdown, or an accident. Like something happens to shake you up so that you realize that there's more to just the body and just the kind of physical, tangible things. And so it is really interesting to watch as where there's a lot of people wanting to go down this spirit-led path. It's almost like they are trying to get that high, going to the ayahuasca or having the psychedelics, but not understanding that the deeper grounded you are in the body, the actually more you can, because you can hold more voltage without frying yourself. Whereas if you try, you can just fry yourself, and then you've got to come back into the body and do a lot of the work. And you do see a lot of these people, and I've done this myself, where I like the idea of the spirituality and the chakras and all these type of things, but I forgot that you had to use this to get there. I tried to bypass it. And the more I've come and living on acreage and being grounded in the earth and having that responsibility, the more it's almost like you don't even have to try. It's more of a natural just state because your body is wired for it. We just have to make sure it's healthy enough that it can receive. It doesn't need to chase. It's like its innate wisdom is that it's already there. It's like we've just got to turn that switch, and the body's health turns that switch on.
100%, yeah.
So there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. You talked about inclusivity. Now, this is something I agree with, but it's almost like in the world right now is we've taken it to a next level where inclusivity is so loose and so flowy and so almost delusional that like there's no structure and boundary. And it's almost like society's rebelling at everything structured. Like, rebelling against religion, rebelling against governmental structure and things like this. And I agree there's a lot of the system that don't work and that were designed and they could be tweaked. And I 100% agree with that. But a lot of the time it's like we want to just throw out everything and start afresh. And I've had that in my own personal experience where back in the day I sold club crawl tickets and sales and talking to people and drinking and partying, and there was a life of the party. When I went down that, what I thought was more of a spirit-led path, I kind of closed that chapter of my life off and rebelled against it. I went the complete opposite. But what I realized was that those aspects of myself were still there, but they could be used in a different way because they taught me a lot and I experienced a lot. And by shutting down that salesman part of me, or by shutting down that person that can talk in front of a crowd, like I don't talk in front of nightclub crowds anymore, but I can talk to people about health and wellness. And if I shut that part of myself down, that life force down, it's a delusion. And so I do see a lot of delusion around inclusivity where it's almost like the words being manipulated to, we need to be progressive. We always, everything's about progression, but it's like there's no one, it's like we're driving off a cliff and everyone's like, we're just being progressive. But if someone in the car is like, hey, I'm pretty sure we're about to drive off a cliff, they're looked at as like evil or bad or a bigot. And so I wanted to kind of understand your opinion of what I look at as a lot of delusion, because for me, it's if, a child's about to put their hand on a fire and you say, don't do that. Yeah, you can let them burn their hand, but there's almost a level of responsibility of, hey, that's probably not the best idea. Let's not burn your hand. Let's not put the fork in the PowerPoint. I want to have your opinion on that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many quote-unquote woke movements that have probably created more damage than they have created freedom and expansion. When I say that the goal is inclusivity, I mean it as an internal experience, not as an externally enforced thing. Like, if I look at you and in my heart, I feel you as an extension of myself, it makes for my experience of our communication a very beautiful one. If I look at a tree and I feel it's a part of me, an extension of my lungs, it just makes life blissful and worth living and very beautiful. Now, if I cross the line where I no longer know where my body ends and where something else begins, I go insane. If I don't know who's Nicolas, and some people, when they have deep spiritual experiences, they go into spiritual emergency and they end up in the mental health hospital. Or if you do it the right way, then you can't really hold the body. If you cross a certain line, you can't hold the body because your energies cannot stay in such a small container. Like, the water drop from the river, when it arrives to the ocean, it becomes the ocean. It's no longer a river, but it's like a bubble of air. Once you pop it, it's just one with the air outside of it. So that's the inclusion that I refer to. What is happening today is labeled as inclusion, but it's like a forced thing. I'm coming up with things where I'm playing with the boundaries or afraid to look at the biological boundaries and structures that we come with. And in my mind, I'm starting to have my own thoughts around this. And I want to enforce that everybody else agrees with whatever nonsense is coming in my mind.
Lighthouse is my signature 6 or 12-month one-on-one mentorship program. It's pretty much where I've gathered all my life experience as studying with the Czech Institute for 15 years, my intuitive gifts, my personal challenges, which I do not wish upon anybody, and to fast track you to where you want to go. And my approach is very simple. One, it's all about vitality and life force. Change takes a truck ton of energy. So you need that vitality and life force to ground you so that you're resilient when blockages come up, and they will. Two, we've got to get you clear, get that clarity on where you're going, because once you've got that little bit of life force back, you can start to dream bigger, that biggest vision for your life. And then three, it's all about confidence. Now, as a lighthouse, you may have weathered many a storm. You may feel battered, you may feel broken, you may feel defeated. But as we rebuild your confidence, you start to shine bright, and it helps to guide others home because they see that beacon of hope, that brightness of you sharing your truth, sharing the essence of who you are. And the truth is, the world really needs a lot of lighthouses right now because people are stuck, people are overwhelmed, and we need your brilliance, that light within inside you, to be shining so bright that people can spot you from a bloody mile away. Now, all you got to do is head on over to thathealthdude.com/lighthouse or send me a DM on any of my socials and we can chat and see if it works. I take on a few clients every year and let's see if we can make some magic happen.
In fact, I have a very, very, very close friend whose family members were sent a notice, like an email or a bulletin printed thing from their school. They have a couple of kids in this school, I believe it's primary school, and they sent them this letter saying, "Hey, dear parents, we just wanted to inform you that there are 2 students that now identify as cats. So we have created a space in, room number ta-ta-ta, where we've put like one of those scratch poles and a litter box. And we ask that you be inclusive and you respect the kids' freedom, and you tell your children to not comment in an uninvited way about their choice and their freedom to identify as cats. Thank you, blah, 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 the director of the school." They sent it. This is not a random thing. This is happening in schools right now. It starts with, am I a man? Am I a woman? Am I a mix of whatever? Am I one of the 20-something, 60-something genders that people come up with? And what it's creating is just so much chaos. So much chaos, because what a child needs is structure. They thrive on structure. It's a scary world. They don't know who they are. They're smaller than everybody else around them. They don't know how life works. Like, they need some guidance. They need to look up at the adults and feel like, okay, like things are safe. And safe and structured go hand in hand. If your house, let's say if you were in a home that has a loose structure, like, we wouldn't be having this call. Like, if things are about to fall, we will be in this constant state of anxiety because we don't really know. There's no strong foundation. And the same thing is happening. If there's not a strong foundation, a strong understanding of basic things, biological things, at a point where the child should be thinking about different things, creative expressions and whatnot, and at a point where they shouldn't be worried about trying to figure out things that anyway is too young to figure out. A lot of the tattoos that I got were in my mid and late 20s, where by most people's standards, I was already an adult. I was already making my own money. Like, I was not living with my parents. I had a well-developed brain and I could make my own decisions. And just over a few years after I got the tattoos, I looked back and I realized, wow, like I didn't know who I was. If I could go back, my choices would have been different. Because a lot of my tattoos are women, naked women, things that are around sensuality, around passion, and nothing wrong with that, but it just doesn't represent the fullness of who I am and things that are way, way, way more meaningful for me today. But in my 20s, I'm driven by hormones and testosterone, and so let's get some naked women on my arms. No. If I was given the choice when I was less than 15-year-old, less than 10 years old, like, for sure it would have been way messy. I know that it takes a while for a human being to get to know who they are, what they want, and what's important for them. And to put such weight on a child, you need to decide what's your gender, and to start kind of forcing the idea like it's okay if you're a boy and you feel like a girl, it's okay if you're a female. Let that person, once they're adults, figure it out. Hey, you know what? This is what I feel like. I can live with the consequences of my own choices. But early on, it just creates so much confusion. And for what? I know I wrote a post on Facebook that was quite controversial, where I was saying that a parent that promotes gender affirming care, that's how they call it. Basically, I wrote any parent that promotes that is unfit to be a parent. And you can imagine that got a lot of controversial, like a lot of people fighting against that. But also so many people messaged me. There was this guy that messaged me and he said, man, thank you for speaking up about this thing, because I feel the same way, and I will, I don't have the gut to write about that, because I know how it will be received, which was evident. There was so much hate in the comments and so much people, you're a bigot, you're this and that. But this guy came to me and he said, I grew up and I saw my father transition. I saw my father I don't know how old his father was, but I saw him, he was a man. He transitioned into being a woman. And he said, now 20, 30 years have passed, and he's noticing, and he has spoken as well with his father. He's noticing the deterioration of his father's mental health over so many reasons. And he came to him and he shared with him that he regretted it, that it was not really like that he made a choice out of how he was feeling in the moment, but that afterwards he realized that desire to transition was not like, it was about something far, far, far different than what it was. And he said, man, I saw him and he made his choice, and he was an adult, so he could think for himself. He already have kids, The challenge is that, for example, and I worked with people when I was more involved in the personal development coaching or relationship coaching, I had clients that, I remember I had one client that had transitioned, and he used to be a she. And I remember when he shared his story, to me it made total sense. Like when he was a little girl, she grew up in a household where there was so much violence, and the mother used to get beaten up, and the father was this like abusive and overpowering kind of being, and basically grew up in a place where it was so unsafe to be a woman, and only what a man wanted. I think they were of an Italian family or something. There was a lot of chauvinism, and they grew up with so much fear, so much shame of being a woman, so much hatred for their father, because he was abusing his power, so much resentment towards their mother because she was just weak and unable to stand up for herself. Like, I understood very clearly that this person had transitioned not because they were a man in a woman's body, but it was so clear because the decision came after a big breakdown in the family. And it was an attempt to cope with the situation they were living, which was internally that kid realized that it is unsafe to be a woman. Women are not respected in this house. Only men have their needs, their wants, their voice heard and respected. Meaning, like, it was a survival strategy. If I become a man, then I'm not gonna get what my mom is getting. And like this, I've heard so many cases of people that what they're living through is some form of trauma, and some form of internal dissonance, and they feel that the solution for that is going to happen through changing the body. I have yet to meet someone who messes with their system and with so many hormones who ends up in better health than before. Very often, imagine that every girl you date after a month of being with you just ditches you. Every girl you date after a month of spending time with you just tells you, oh, you're a horrible man, and then she leaves. And you're in pain. And instead of using that to ask yourself, well, like, who am I being? What's going on? What's the role I'm playing in this? What's my lesson? You think, well, you know what? Maybe I just need better clothes. I just need bigger biceps. Are you going to feel better immediately? Yes. It's like rearranging furniture in a sinking ship. It looks good, looks like something got done, like there's progress, but that's not the issue. Like, all right, you feel like a boy, You want to take hormones, you feel like a girl, you want to chop your dick off. Man, the moment you feel like, yes, I stood up for my freedom, but if your freedom depended on something external, then like you're still a slave. Now the problem is you've taken a step that you can't pull back. And you took it at a time in your life when you didn't know who you were. And your parents were way too immature to actually learn how to say no. Like, people are afraid of saying no. People are afraid of drawing a line. This is part of it.
The main thing I wanted to talk about is the immaturity of the parent. It's like the parents they're so obsessed with being like seen. So it's almost like the trendy thing. Look, I'm so progressive. It's almost like it's like the kid, the father that wants their child to be a football player. And they're taking them there, and they don't really enjoy it, but they come on, because they want to live through the child. And this deep level of irresponsibility is fueled then by a medical industry that is making billions of dollars. For example, the surgeries, it's something like a 67% case of something's going to go wrong, or higher. That's a pretty high statistic, and it's because you are messing with what is, but still going ahead with that, and schools enforcing it, and you can kind of see where there's almost like an outside influence, which is trying for people to lose identity of who they are, because once you lose identity of who you are, you don't have thought, you don't have creation. It's almost like creation just stops. And what I see is adult avoiding responsibility and avoiding the whole saying, evil flourishes when good men and women do nothing. And when you are, there's also the other thing. It's like in the major wars, it wasn't so much that this side or this side were evil. It's the people in the middle that just did nothing and allowed it to happen. They allowed their neighbors to be taken away. They let it happen because they were too self-absorbed. And I understand that people want to protect themselves and protect their family, but it's almost like we're allowing delusion to happen, and we're rewarding mental health like challenges. Yeah. And here you go. You can be the flavor of the month this month, which would be okay if there was no long-term consequences. And there is. And I post similar things sometimes that are controversial, because I see it almost as a man's duty as a protector to, when you see something that is going to harm people, you say something about it. And you take those arrows so that child, that person doesn't have to live through years and years in chaos, and also a shortened lifespan because of so many complications with trying to screw with the human body. It's almost like a responsibility to protect the children. And it's kind of got to that point, like, where a society castrates their own children and it's applauded. Like, that's pretty messed up when you think about it.
Yeah. On the other hand, those parents that agree that a child should go through that, like, it may sound off, but I'm glad that those genes are not continuing. Yeah.
I know what you mean. It's sad but it's like with everything, as things evolve, it's almost like the survival of the fittest, and the fittest in mind as well. And there's a really great book by Weston A. Price, which actually talks about nutrition and mental health and how these genes don't really continue to pass on. And that's a good thing, because then, it doesn't keep expanding. But it's also really, as an empathetic person, it is hard to watch things like this happen to children and teenagers and people who don't quite know who they are. Like, when I was in high school, I wanted a tattoo, and I told myself, I give myself a year, and if I still want it in a year, I'll get it. And the tattoo was, and I kid you not, I wanted a yellow boxing kangaroo with flexing his arm on my arm with the Southern Cross, which is like the star system in Australia, like that. And that's what I wanted. So I would have had a big yellow boxing kangaroo because I was patriotic about being an Aussie. And I still am. But yeah, it's something that's irreversible. And in that moment, I thought that was a really great idea. And it was almost like it was pretty much 11 months and almost 15 days. Yeah, it's halfway through, close to 12 months. And I realized that's the dumbest thing I could ever do. And I'm so glad that I didn't just go and do that. And because my life would be different, it's like you're talking about with your tattoos. Your tattoos is something that, yes, is physically on your body, but it's not so much affecting the basic foundations of your hormonal structure and your functional anatomy of your body. It's not really screwing with that so much. It might have some health implications, but majority of it's more of a how you're physically seen and how you see yourself. But yeah, it is a crazy thing that I see, and it's hard for me to stay quiet about it. But at the same time, unlike you, that certain portion of the population wants to wipe themselves out. Like, that's their free choice. That's what their spirit, their soul wants. And I can't save them. But I also, it's like going from that savior complex of like, I want to save people, to also being like, I'm going to speak my truth. And if it rocks the boat a little bit or if it annoys people a little bit, I'm fine with that because I'm fine with being disliked. I prefer to say it, to express it, so that at least I did what I thought was right in that moment, and whatever happens, happens. I just find it just really fascinating. Like, all of the world is, we're at that grinding point that you were talking about at the beginning, where instead of doing it gracefully ourselves, we're just like, it's like two goats, ramming at each other. And, just constantly doing it and doing it and doing it every day until one of them gets so tired and goes, all right, you're the winner. Yeah. So is there anything final that you would like to discuss or talk about? So you have your SpiritLed Academy. Is that what it's called? And so that's specifically for people that are entrepreneurial or wanting to go out on their own to follow that, it's that tingle. It's that thing that no matter how much you ignore it, you can't ignore it. You can't suppress it. It gets to a point where you cannot hold that thing down anymore and you need to action it. But a lot of people don't know how to action it. Is that the type of person? Like, who's your ideal type of person like that you flourish with and really, really support and help?
Yeah, so I'm working with people who have already taken the leap of faith. So they're not sitting in a cubicle dreaming about what they would love to do. No, they already quit. They've worked with a handful of clients. They may have a full roster of one-on-one clients, but are feeling like scattered, a little burnt out, like I don't have time, sales calls and coaching calls and creating content. And it feels like juggling too many balls in the air, and they find themselves kind of stuck at a certain income threshold. I work with people that are like that, or that are starting and just want to save themselves the trouble and the time and the waste of money that comes with not knowing how to do things properly. And I help them get clear on their message, their offer, and their conversations, their sales conversations, basically. So the core of it is just making it very, 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 very simple for people who want to be of service to the world to know the steps, the practical steps. That's the SpiritLed Business Academy. Now, what goes in between in every lesson is that I'm clear that a lot of times it's not that we don't know what we need to do, but something is holding us back from doing it. Most people know that maybe they should post more often, that maybe they should have more conversations, that maybe they should be more assertive in their sales calls, whatever. Most people know more or less what they could and should do to make more money. And yet they don't do it. Why? Because there's something else that gets in the way. Very often a fear of being seen, imposter syndrome, sense of insecurity, I'm not good enough, meaning shame, so many other things, an attachment to who they are used to being, fear of what their friends, their family are going to think about them if they start sharing about something new, fear of trying and failing and being seen publicly, quote unquote, seen publicly as someone who failed. Nobody's keeping track of these things, but people are afraid, what if I try and it doesn't work? And how people are going to see me and they know that I tried that thing and it didn't work. So there's so much that gets in the way of someone wanting to build their business. Sometimes it's just an underlying sense of anxiety. If I make more money, I'm going to be busier and I'm not going to be able to enjoy my life and have free time and do what I love. And I help them reconcile these things and do the inner work, clear the essential baggage, the emotions, the stuff that gets in the way of them being able to find clarity, courage, and commitment to being of service. Because once you remove those blockages, if you know what you need to do and you have a group of people that are all focused on the same thing, supporting each other, you have the accountability, you have the mentorship, then it's much easier, much easier. Otherwise, if I tell you, okay, ABC, this is what you need to do, but I don't work with you in the part that is underneath your own blockage, then it's going to be very hard. Or the other way around, if I stick around just trying to coach you and make you deep into your trauma and ancestral wounds and anxiety and insecurity, and we work on that, we can do that until the day we die, and you're not, that is not going to transfer into having a profitable business. So I'm bridging these two things. I'm helping people dig into what's keeping them with old stories of lack, of limitation, of rejection, of playing a bigger game, while providing very, very, very simple ways of making things work so that at least they can get past 10K months. That's my promise so far.
Awesome. There's definitely a lot of people that are in that space. And, I do encourage all people that are entrepreneur or have that entrepreneurial spark. So you might not quite be at that level yet, but I do encourage you to have a go. And because both us, Nicolases, are examples of when you step away from that old identity that's actually that very wounded part of yourself that's using whatever vices, sex, money, praise, whatever it is, whatever addiction it is. And that's what it is. It's an addiction. And you're stuck in that addiction loop. And when you start to step out of that, it is quite scary. You are quite vulnerable. And it is the unknown. But it's such a greater life, and the experience that you have as you go through that self-grinding is actually a lot more pleasurable than when you try to suppress it and try to block your ears, because the universe and your soul and spirit will make it happen whether you like it or not, because you are destined to go down a certain path. And you can take the easy, more fun, enjoyable route, like working with someone like Nicolas, or doing it the hard way. And, I'm someone that's done both. And, you do the hard way, then you're like, all right, I'm going to not do it the hard way. And then sometimes you fall back into the old patterns and you do it the hard way again. Oh, why did I do this again? And it's that constant reminder that we can either be the victim or that one that kind of goes with the flow and doesn't have that strong boundary and kind of gets flown around in the wind, or we can be the structure. We can be what I call that lighthouse. We can be that, and we can actually, shine out into the world and really own who we are. And a lot of people struggle with self-worth, including myself, and confidence and these type of things. And they are something that we work through. And when we work through them, life is better. There isn't so much chaos. There's a lot of peace. There's more bliss, but not smidgens of bliss, like extended periods of bliss in your relationships. And everything really does start to flow. So I'm very grateful for having you on the podcast today and learning more about you. And I knew quite a bit, but it's always interesting to see how similar the stories are and how the worlds merge. And this is just an example of when you do the things, you will find people that have those similar journeys and help you to shift to that next level and to expand and to laugh with and grow with and all these type of things. So Thank you very, very much for being on the podcast. And all the information for Nicolas will be in the show notes. So reach out to him if you're interested in learning about his work and following what he does. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Nicholas.